Nathen Harvey, everybody!
All right. Thank you so much. And Chris, it wasn't a DNS problem, turns out. It was a first time for everything, so here we go. Hello, thank you so much for having me. Let's talk about a decade with DORA. And just to be very clear, I am bad at math. So if you know how long a decade is, you'll quickly find out that I don't. So before we talk about DORA, though, I want to go back in time pretty far, back to 2009, actually. And at the Velocity Conference in 2009, Paul Hammond and John Osbaugh gave this talk, 10 deploys a day at Flickr. And people were fainting in the room. They were throwing tomatoes, saying, this is bullshit, it's completely unsafe, how can you do this? But in that talk, the other thing that they mentioned was that Ops' job is to enable the business. We're not here just to rack and stack servers or just to run cloud instances. We're here to enable the business. And it turns out that that's developers' job also. And that we do this by lowering the risk of change. And we lower the risk of change through both tools and culture. So in 2009, it was tools and culture coming together. And speaking of coming together, they put out this very memorable slide. Who has not seen this slide before? A couple of people are lying. Yes, okay. So we put dev and ops together in a heart, and a little bit later that year, there were some folks, not too far from here, that decided we should pull off a conference, and they hosted the very first DevOps days. But I'm really here to give you a little bit of history about DORA as well. So let me introduce myself. Hi, I'm Nathen. That's enough of that. So what we set out to do with DORA, and maybe a question you have for yourselves, is how do you get the most out of your investment into technology and into technologists? Both. It's the tools and the people. As an organization, how do we get the most value out of that? And in order to do so, what you need is a way to assess how you're doing today, a way to prioritize what should I work on next, because we all know there's too much to do, which things should we focus on, and then we need feedback cycles that will tell us how that's going. And above all, we need the organizational culture and sort of the institutional muscle to repeat this process over and over and over again, because we're on a journey of getting better at getting better, a journey of continuous improvement. And this is where we all get to say hello to Dora. Everyone say, hi, Dora. Hello, Dora. Hello, Dora. Not this Dora, the explorer. I'm sure you know her. Not this one either. You all know this one, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. But if we were in, sorry, there was a heavy sigh with that one. I don't feel your pain, but I empathize. If we were in the state of Ohio, back in the US, they have designated outdoor refreshment areas. You see, in the US, there are very few places you can carry a beer around outside in public. But if you go to the DORA, you can do that. So, of course, none of these are the DORA that we're here to talk about today. Instead, we're here to talk about DORA, DevOps research and assessment. And I'm going to give you a brief history. And thank goodness for you, I have a timer, so it will be a brief history. So we started in 2009 at Velocity with the VelocityConf talk and then the first DevOps days. 2010 and 2011 roll along. This whole DevOps thing is turning into a movement. People are starting to it's really starting to catch on. And there's a woman at the time working at Puppet Labs, which was, it was called Puppet Labs back then, I think, maybe. Anyhow, Alana Brown said, hey, this DevOps thing, I think we should write some words about it, and we should ask the people around the world how they're going with it. And so they published the first kind of state of DevOps report. They didn't call it that. It was just a PowerPoint presentation, but they'd run a survey. They wrote this paper called Evolution of DevOps. Is it an emerging discipline, or is it buzzword hype? And I think in this room today, we can still ask that question. Is DevOps an emerging discipline, or is it just buzzword hype? I don't know. So that's what happened in 2011. 2012 comes along. The industry and the community keep growing. 2013 comes along, and Gene Kim, George Spafford, and Kevin Baer published this book, The Phoenix Project. Hopefully you've read this book. Who's read the book? Okay, great, excellent. That's many folks in the audience. It's definitely a good book to read. And in that same year, Puppet publishes the very first State of DevOps report in 2013. And in this report, they first introduced these 4 measures for software delivery performance, which we've all kind of come to know as the DORA 4 keys now. And we'll talk more about those 4 keys in a bit. But the way that they sort of measured teams, they asked questions around, how long have you been doing the DevOps? That was how they organized teams, right? So this team has been doing it for 12 months, this team for 18 months, this team for 3 years. Those that have been doing it longer had better scores across those 4 key metrics. 2014 comes along, and Dr. Nicole Forsgren meets up with the people from Puppet. Dr. Nicole Forsgren at the time was working in a university, and she was studying and teaching statistics and doing a bunch of research into IT systems and how systems work, including us, the people in those systems. And she hooked up with the Puppet people and said, you know, I want to help you with this survey, and I want to bring a little bit more science and a little bit more rigor to that. So she came along, she took over as the lead investigator or the lead analyst on collecting all of that data. They published the 2014 report. Fascinating thing happens in 2014. They ask every survey respondent, if you are willing, share the stock ticker for your organization. And then they did this analysis to see that those that were high-performing software delivery teams, those teams had the best market growth, market capitalization growth over the 3-year period. So they really made this connection between software delivery performance being important for organizational performance. 2015 comes along, guess what? There's another State of DevOps report. It gets a little repetitive from here on out. There's going to be one almost every year. But in 2015, they said, hey, if you're moving fast, that's great, but also don't forget about that keeping things running bit. Because once you're moving fast enough, you might get better return by investing in keeping things up and improving your stability. 2016 comes along, and we get another State of DevOps report, but this time, this State of DevOps report is co-published by Puppet Labs, and by this time, an organization has been founded called DORA. DORA was a company. It was founded by Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim. So the very first Puppet and DORA State of DevOps report gets published. 2017 comes along, we get another State of DevOps report where there's a heavy focus on transformational leadership. Turns out, you know, our leaders do matter, and the way that they show up for us and enable the work that we do has a big part in how well we're able to deliver software, how well we're able to function as a team. Also in 2017, Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, and Gene Kim published the book Accelerate. How many of you have read this book? Great. All right. This is definitely a book to read. You're going to get book recommendations all throughout. The problem with Accelerate, though, was on page 17, they introduced the 4 keys, those 4 measures of software delivery performance. And then everyone who was reading the book, not everyone, not you, but like people that you know who were reading the book, closed the book after page 17 and said, we got it. It's 4 measures, that's all we need to worry about. What they needed to do, though, was get to the appendix. This is Appendix A. This is a structural equation model, or a SEM. And it shows this crazy connection between all of the things that DORA has investigated and how they predict or enable other things, like software delivery performance, like organizational performance, and so forth. This is the important part of Accelerate. And in order to get better at those 4 key measures, you've got to work on these capabilities. You have to have good strength in those capabilities. At this point in our story, we reach an AI-generated fork in the road. So this thing happened in 2017. DORA was a company, Puppet was a company. They're both publishing a report together, but they kind of took a little split. Now, it was a friendly split. And today, Puppet, they were just up here earlier talking about a State of DevOps report that they published. They continue to publish annual reports, and DORA continues to publish annual reports. So it's not that either one is better than the other. It's cool that we're all researching ourselves and learning more about ourselves. So 2018 comes along, and the Accelerate State of DevOps report is published by DORA, connecting it back to the book and also differentiating from the Puppet Labs one. In the 2018 report, they said, you know, maybe not just software delivery, maybe the availability of your services matter also. And then there were some SREs who read this later and said, availability, that just means whether it's up or down. And they said, no, no, no. What we mean is, can you meet the promises that you're making as you're running your service? So it's more than just availability, and that comes back in our story maybe later. Also in 2018, I started working at Google, so that's an important thing to know. Oh, no, 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 that's not the part of the story. That part is true, but also DORA was acquired by Google Cloud, and that's where the research continues. So 2019, another State of DevOps report came out. By 2019, we were like all hip to this DevOps thing by now, but in many large organizations, they were like, yeah, that team over there, they got the DevOps down, and they're having a lot of fun. over here it sucks. How do we get that little pocket of success and grow it across the organization? And what they found in their research was that communities of practice are kind of the best way to spread that. Not by any sort of top-down mandate or anything like that. Certainly not a center of excellence. How many of you work in a center of excellence? I don't know why I keep asking you to raise your hands. All right, so let's give them all a round of applause. They're all excellent. They work there. That's coming to you from the pond of mediocrity. That's where all of us work together. Yes. So 2019, and then 2020 happened. I said there was an annual report every year. 2020 was a year that we should all just maybe forget. It was a dark year. But actually, we didn't publish a report, but DORA did publish probably their most underutilized, underrated white paper, the ROI of a DevOps transformation. Why is this important? Because it gives us formulas to go and measure how does software delivery performance actually, what does it mean to the business? How does it improve our revenue? How does it decrease our costs? And it gives you the formulas to go do that and then have a conversation with your CFO. How many of you need more? I'm not going to ask any more questions, sorry. So if you need more headcount, what you should do is tell your boss or your CFO or your CEO, hey, this stuff matters, and if we put more headcount here, we're going to get a return on that investment. This paper can help you make that justification and talk to them in terms that they care about, not in how many deploys a day are you going to do, because they don't care about that. Okay, so that's 2020. 2021 comes along. We get a new lead scientist that's doing the research, Dr. Dustin Smith. We publish another report. In the 2021 report, we started investigating internal documentation. And we've done that 2021, 22, 23, and in 2024. Internal documentation is like the superpower that you don't know that you have. The teams that are really good at internal documentation see tremendous value from those investments. And I'm not even talking about end-user documentation, the documentation that you use inside of your team. Also, there's this new thing, AI, that has come along, and maybe if you're struggling with writing documentation, maybe just start by asking a bot to write that documentation for you. That could be a good thing. All right, so continuing on to 2022, we get a new lead scientist, Derek DeBells. He is still with us, and I mean, they're all still with us, if you will, but he's the one doing the research now. We published the 2022 report. There was a deep dive into security. Guess what? It doesn't matter what tools you use, it's culture that is the biggest predictor of whether or not you have good security practices. No, I said I'm not going to ask questions anymore. All right, no one's surprised by that because no one raised their hand when I didn't ask that question, so we're good. All right, 2022 also, we founded the DORA community because my team would go out and talk to customers all the time and folks like yourselves, and we get asked the same questions all the time, and I don't have all the answers. We should all get together. And so we started this DORA community of practice, which you should definitely join because you cannot improve alone. It takes a team to improve, and look around. There's a bunch of colleagues here that will help you, and we can all meet up in the DORA community, dora.community. Go join that, please. All right, 2023 comes along, and we listen to the community, and we publish this thing called DORA Core. What is DORA Core? Remember that SEM that I showed you earlier, that really complicated diagram? Well, it turns out we publish one of those in basically every report. Every year, there's a new SEM that comes out. So how do you make any sense of what practices should I follow? It gets rather confusing. And so what we do is say, just put them all on transparencies and put them in the overhead projector. Just kind of squish them all together and then there. That's super clear. Just do that and you'll be awesome. Trust me. That helps no one. So we created this thing called DORA Core, which kind of smushes them all together and simplifies them a little bit. Now, what DORA Core has is a little bit less scientific rigor, but we have some criteria for what goes into DORA Core. The first criteria is that we have to have investigated it at least twice. So if you read a report and saw a capability, and you're like, man, that's awesome, we should have that in core, but it's the only time we've investigated it, it can't go to core. The second criteria is that we have to have lived through experience that it's actually helpful and beneficial to practitioners and teams around the world. Also, this is Core V1. We're all going to modernize here in just a couple of slides. So you're welcome to take a picture of this one, but the more modern one is coming soon. But basically, what this all boils down to, and what DORA has taught us over time, and the way that DORA sort of does its research, which capabilities predict better performance, which performance measures help predict better outcomes, better organizational performance, better team well-being, things like that. So that's the core model. Then in 2023, no surprise, we publish a report. This one is a big look into user centricity. How many of you know your users, like the names of your users, how they use your tools? Unfortunately, too many software teams turn into software factories where they pull a ticket, they do the thing, they ship it on down the line, and they don't care. But we found that teams that actually care about their users, like know what their users are trying to do, get good feedback signals from those users, they are the best performing teams. And then 2024 comes along, here we are. Remember in 2023 when they had that old busted core V1? We're gonna all modernize, ready? Modernize, there we go. So we simplified it even more. We have these three sort of criteria of capabilities, but when we simplified it this much, everyone was like, yeah. Climate for learning, fast flow, fast feedback, yeah, we need that, but what does any of that mean? So this is what you show your executives, and then when you and your team are ready, you can click through and get the more detailed view. Again, it's a little bit simpler, but it helps you kind of understand where does my team need to invest in order to improve? What's holding us back? And that's the history of DORA. So that's a quick run through of the last 10 years, but again, I'm not good at math, so it's maybe more than 10 years. What have we actually learned, though, if we look at some of the big lessons here? So first, DORA contributed and popularized these 4 measures of software delivery performance. These have fundamentally become industry standards. For better or for worse, these have become industry standards on how we measure software delivery performance. Now, I think it's a good thing. We all have this common way to talk about this. But then the other thing that we learned, and when we started thinking about these, you have these throughput metrics and these stability metrics, and everyone said, well, we got to pick one. We can either be fast or we can be stable. But it turns out what the research has shown us year in and year out for over a decade now is that stability and throughput feed each other. So in order to be stable, you have to be fast. You have to be able to change your systems fast. And the way that you get there is through smaller changes that you're always shipping. Smaller changes, less work in progress, smaller batch sizes. But then other people, like the world, also says, oh, those 4 metrics, I got systems that can give me that data. I'm going to build a dashboard. And if you've thought about building a dashboard for DORA metrics, my strongest piece of advice to you is please don't. Don't go build that dashboard yourself. You can go get these numbers a number of different ways. My favorite way to understand how you're doing on those software delivery performance metrics is to get in a room with your team and have a conversation. The actual numbers don't matter. The direction that those numbers are having and that you're building that shared context, that's what matters most. So one way, though, that you can get these measures is go take the DORA Quick Check. It's available on dora.dev. We ask 4 questions. Who knew? And it will tell you sort of how you're doing. But it doesn't matter how you're doing because the goal is to get better. The goal is to improve. So how you're doing today is just a snapshot, but you need that baseline to understand how you're going. The other thing you could do instead of building your own dashboard is you could buy one of these products. Or some of these are open source. Some of them you can't buy. I'm sorry, I lied to you a little bit. But you can go and pull one of these off the shelf and install it within your team. Do not spend 2 years integrating all of your systems so that you have a very precise dashboard at the end of 2 years. I've seen that happen, unfortunately. The other thing that we've learned, so DORA gave us these 4 metrics. DORA has also shown us through data that performance matters. Software delivery performance and the reliability of your systems drive better organizational outcomes and better well-being for your team. That's important. We also know that culture is the cornerstone. Let me reintroduce you to Dr. Ron Westrom. If you've not seen this before, take a picture of this one for sure. You want to be on that right-hand side of the diagram. You want to have a performance-oriented team. When you're looking at this slide, if you're looking at this slide for the first time, you see your team on this slide. I know you do because everyone does. Don't worry, your team can get better. It's true. All right. The way that we improve is by alleviating your team's constraints. When you think back to those capabilities, you want to take a look at those capabilities and understand which of these is holding us back as a team, which is preventing us from shipping faster, shipping safer, delivering more value to our customers. So you find that capability, that's where you make an investment. And then you take a scientific approach to it. We have a hypothesis that by improving our automated testing, that's going to improve our software delivery performance, which is going to help all of us feel less burnt out. Cool. Now go do that. Go do that thing. Go invest in automated testing and prove it out. Really, I don't want you to believe any of our research. I want you to replicate it. I want you to say, oh, they found that this particular thing helps with this other thing. Let's try it. Does it work in our context? Because frankly, the way that we gather data is we run a survey every year. So we have inputs from all over the world, but not everyone in the world works on your team. Wouldn't that be amazing? Think of the things you could get done. But you have to take this research and contextualize it and embrace a mindset and a practice of continuous improvement. And when you have an experimental framework and you take that experimental approach, you are going to have victories and you're going to have failures. And both are success because you can learn from those changes that you're making. And build community structures to help transform your organization. DevOps Days is a community structure, and it's transformed the way we all work. Do that same thing within your organization. There are great benefits beyond just performance, including better well-being. So what do we mean when we say well-being? We mean you have lower burnout, who you are matters, can you show up to work as yourself, that we distribute work fairly. Think about how work gets distributed on your team. Does everyone have equal chance to take on the good work, the work that's rewarded, and the work that's satisfying? And at the same time, does everyone have an equal chance to pick up some of the toil? Are we sharing that load? And that leads to better job satisfaction as well. Now, for the 1 minute I have left, I want to talk about the future of DORA. So we had a decade that was the past. We had what have we learned, and now what is the future of DORA? I think it's really hard to say. Although AI generated a crystal ball for me, it doesn't work. I can't really see the future with this. But I do think AI is an important thing. It's changing how we approach software delivery. It's changing how we approach organizing our teams and the work that we do. But I also think that today there is a heavy emphasis on using AI to generate code. And if you think about the constraint in your system for delivering software, my final question for today, how many of you work on a team where the constraint in delivering value is your ability to generate code? Yeah, no one raises their hand because I've asked too many questions and you're tired of raising your hand. But also, that's not your constraint. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use AI to generate code, because with AI-generated code, maybe you can generate code faster, which means you can iterate faster. You can try out more things. But think about where you're going to use AI in other parts of the system. Can the AI come in and write tests for you to make it safer to change the system? And I'm done. So with that, I want to say thank you for my timer, and thank you all for having me. Enjoy the rest of DevOps Days.